Hello, hello. We are here today to talk about building community, inspiring climate change, and encouraging physical activity through trails. Trails really are a space that inspire community, and they offer that close to home experience to really enjoy the outdoors and connect with family, friends, and your favorite destinations. And they also are a way to really get involved and know and understand your local environment. Next slide. We have an exciting conversation with storytellers and experts today. Myself, I am Heather Irish, the Communications Director at Rails to Trails Conservancy, and we'll be speaking with three of our favorite experts. Ken Rose, the CDC's Physical Activity and Health Branch expert. Evan Raskin, our National Campaign Manager from earthday.org. And Robin Woods, who's the founder of Women at Work Cycling Club, an amazing group out in Pittsburgh. Next slide. So you may have heard, but we do have a pretty fun event planned. We have Celebrate Trails Day. It's coming up on Saturday, April 22nd. And there's also this little thing called Earth Day that's also happening on that day. So you might have heard about it. These two events are an amazing opportunity that bring people together. Next slide. And these days, it's really important to demonstrate consumer demand for people and communities to really take part in events in their local green spaces and along the trail. And we know that demand continues to grow. You'll see here with the data that last year was another amazing year for trails. Demand for trails was up 45% compared to 2019, which was the before data before the surge in the pandemic. So, trails are really being used by more and more people and more communities across the country. And you'll even see that there's great statistics that show that 24% reported using trails more in 2022 than in 2021, particularly among Black and Latino community members. Next slide. But trails really they have a significant impact on the economy, the health of individuals, and the environment. So what's the return on investment? Currently, the economic impact for trails and active transportation is valued at $34.1 billion. But with more trails and active transportation infrastructure connected across the country, that potential is at $138.5 billion annually, which is huge. Not only that, but there's also CO2 reductions. 13 million tons currently are being saved with a potential of up to 54 million tons. And of course, there's always a health component. And when more people get out on the trails and out on active transportation networks and able to walk and bike and roll and whatever they do to stay active, that equals health cost savings at $20 billion, which has a potential to increase up to 92 billion. Next slide. And so how do we get people to tap into trails? The CDC's Active People, Healthy Nation initiative is a great example of showing this opportunity to get in this graphic that one of their top pillars is community design for physical activity. So this means creating more access and more routes to exercise. And that is hugely important to being able to give people an easy way to get outdoors and get outside and exercise. Next slide. But there's also challenges to getting people to trails. And here are some examples of how we can get people out and knowing that this is available to them. Programming, signage, ambassadors that create really an intentional and welcoming introduction to the outdoors and local spaces, social support from community, friends, and family, destinations that are accessible by walking and biking, separated bike lanes, trails, and greenways, and improving lighting and maintenance are all examples of ways that communities and organizations are working across the country to build safer, more welcoming areas for people to enjoy the outdoors and stay active. Next slide. And the same recommendation are being underscored in the CDC's active parks recommendation. So you see their recommendation is by combining infrastructure improvements with community engagement, programming, public awareness activities, and access enhancements, that's going to increase physical activities at parks, trails, and greenways. Next slide. And you'll see here that there's a wealth of activities and events and community connections that are happening across the country now and through the last few years. In fact, you have one photo to the far left, which is from one of our speakers, Robin, her event last year. And all of these really show that it's building healthy people, healthy communities, and healthy planets. Next slide. It's also important as we build connection, as we get outside, and as we cultivate people's connection to the outdoors, it's important to see representation across the country. One example of how we share representation and people's individual experiences in the outdoors is through our campaign, Trail Moments. We encourage any sort of trail user to share their stories of how they are inspired by trails, by nature, by enjoying the fresh air and access that they have in their local communities. Next slide. And there's also an opportunity to continue sharing resources. We have TrailLink, which is a free trail finder app and desktop. You can go online and find where is the nearest trail near you and start exploring. And there's also plenty of examples for, whether you want to be able to simply go outside and meditate and get some fresh air, bike, walk, run, even enjoy the weather in different climates, and as well as volunteer, whether that's for an Earth Day celebration or service day, or supporting a trail cleanup. There's so many ways to get involved. Next slide. And as you know, public awareness is important. So how do we continue ensuring that people are aware that the connection between being able to access outdoors and being able to get healthier are connected, right? A priority of the CDC is to raise awareness of that and to ensure that people do have easy ways to really incorporate healthy living so seamlessly into their lives. And trails and active transportation infrastructures are a way to make that possible. So we are here with our three experts, and we had some questions. I wanted to really be able to really mine their expertise. They come here from health, community engagement, and the climate. And I'm so excited to have you all three here. Thank you so much for your time. Ken, I wanted to start with you, mainly to focus on health. So, it is fair to say that most people know the importance of physical activity, but only 1 in 4 adults fully meet the physical activity guidelines for aerobic and muscle strengthening activities. So what does it take to motivate people to be physically active?
Well, thank you. First, I'm going to start just briefly talking a little bit about physical activity in the areas that most people may not know about. In other words, people know it's good for you, but a lot of people don't know how good it is for you. So physical activity is good for your health. There are many easy ways to build it into your routine, but I want to highlight that just one brisk walk on a neighborhood trail, for example, has 3 immediate health benefits. It improves your sleep, it reduces symptoms of anxiety, and it reduces blood pressure. Making that walk part of your daily routine has other important long-term health benefits. So, for example, for adults, it improves brain health, reduces the risk of dementia, and reduces a range of chronic diseases like heart disease, diabetes, and cancer. And for kids, it increases academic performance, supports healthy weight, and reduces symptoms of depression. But as you said, unfortunately, 1 in 4 and 1 in 4 adults and 1 in 6 young people fully meet recommendations in the physical activity guidelines for Americans. And $117 billion a year in healthcare costs are associated with inadequate physical activity. So thank you for highlighting Active People, Healthy Nation. CDC launched Active People, Healthy Nation as a national initiative to help 27 million Americans become more physically active by 2027. Now, just a quick word about why trails are so important. Science, as you said, shows that parks, trails, and greenways increase levels of physical activity in a community, particularly, as you noted, when they have added enhancements like community programming, engagement, and/or access. So Active People, Healthy Nation is working to promote trails as a place to go to be active. And this Celebrate Trails Day is a great opportunity to build community awareness and encourage people just to go out for a walk. Now, a bit about what it takes. So one important goal for Active People, Healthy Nation is for people to make that first move, to just get started. We hope that Celebrate Trails events can be a way for people to take that first step. It's a great opportunity to go for a walk with others in your community. Integrating a visit to your local trail into a regular weekly routine can also be a great way to move forward. You could plan a visit on your day off or to make it something to look forward to. And if that's too much for you, you could just try by taking a short walk around the block or to the store or to the bus stop. And you might explore what trails and parks are available in your area. And if you really just don't have the time, try taking the stairs 1 flight at work or parking further from the front door at the grocery store. So our goal in Active People, Healthy Nation is to get people just to try to make that first step, because we know making the first step is important to moving forward and continuing to integrate physical activity into your daily lives.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate those very simple suggestions and how people can change their habits, because habits are so hard and in today's very busy and always on the go 24/7. It seems that sometimes even just taking that walk is the last thing on our mind. So that connection that you had there, that not only does it help us mentally, but it also helps us physically and at all ages. That's a really important tie-in to show that certainly those small changes can add up. Robin, I'd like to ask you the same question, actually, if I may. So what does it take to motivate people to be physically active, and what role do you think trails play, and why is that important?
Well, sometimes I think it'll take a cannonball to get people physically active. But realistically, consistency and visibility. I think that when people see the local groups, advocacy groups, bike club, walking clubs, hiking clubs, when they consistently see them being active locally, that it can be quite the inspiration to getting people active. And just the safety that comes along with being on the trail. A lot of people are uncomfortable being out, cycling amongst traffic. So I've seen that a lot of people feel as though the trails are safe spaces.
Thank you. I want to hear more about that later, so I will return to that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Robin. I also wanted to ask the same question of Evan. So what do you think, what does it take to motivate people to be physically active?
So I think that is a fantastic question, Heather. And from my perspective, it's all about access to urban green space, which these trails and greenways are one of the most essential points of access to that green space. I believe that people are much more likely to take up physical activity when they can do so in an environment that they feel both safe and comfortable in. As Robin mentioned, these are areas that are typically car-free, which reduces a lot of the risks of being physically active within a neighborhood. Additionally, people tend to enter a more natural frame of mind, so to speak. I know that in my own personal experience, this has been a big game changer. When I've lived in neighborhoods that had access to those trails right outside the house, I was out on them every day. And it was a very motivating element to me. And it's really no secret that there is a clear distinction between communities that have access to green space and communities that don't when it comes to health outcomes and when it comes to levels of activity. In fact, we see that communities that are walkable tend to have healthier individuals, oftentimes with a lower rates of obesity within the community when that walkable option is available compared to having to drive everywhere. Similarly, communities that have access to urban green space see longer life expectancies. Sometimes that can be up to a decade longer for some communities. These places, they act as not only an access point for individuals to be participating in physical activity, but it also creates a healthier environment when it comes to air and water pollution. The tree canopies that accompany most of these trails, those are often a moment, or rather an asset that allows for less air pollution to affect the population in this area, leading to lower rates of childhood asthma, leading to people being able to breathe easier and spend more time doing what they love. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate you taking the time to highlight the existing environmental inequalities that exist around the country in many neighborhoods, and how important it is that every community, everyone has access to nature, to the outdoors, and space to just breathe. So thank you. Robin, I told you I'd come back at you. And I do have a question, another question for you.
Sure.
So really across the country, there is a growing appreciation to trails, as we all learned earlier, especially when they're connected to other active transportation infrastructure and important places around the communities that are, really essential to the well-being of the community. I often say, you can feel how important trails are when you're out there, when you're having that experience. It's the place where, neighbors can say hello when they're out for their morning walk or taking a quick trip to the park. So how have you seen trails contribute to a community?
Thank you very much for the question. When I see families on the trail, when I see families, when I see them with their toddlers learning to ride a bicycle, or people taking their dogs out for walks, even dog walkers, taking their clients out for a walk. I think that the trails create, as we all said, a safe space. I know it does for me. And I'm on the trails a lot, sometimes twice a week. And so it creates a safe environment for new cyclists because, you know, you have to start somewhere. You can't always ride around in a circle. And being on the trails gives me the opportunity to teach people trail etiquette and how to conduct themselves and ride safely, and to watch out for other pedestrians and children on the trail. I do a lot of education and training workshops on the trail, the local trails. I see, especially with the influx of e-bikes, I see a lot of seniors on the trail. Again, it's a safe place, you know, for people. And my goal is to get more people of color to experience the beauty of the trails and how it can quell your anxiety and, you know, alleviate depression, just make a difference in your overall view of the world. I do a lot of trail maintenance and cleaning up on the trails. So it's really near and dear to my heart. And I really like to have, you know, expose more people. And that's what, more people to the trails. And that's one of the focuses of Women at Work Cycling Club.
I really appreciate you sharing your experience, but also kind of going back to what you were saying earlier about how, you know, support to get out on the trail is so important, and to have that safety and connection, but also the education, right? Because if somebody's picking up a new habit like biking, they may not know where to start. And so it's so important that community groups like Women at Work exist around the country for people who are wanting to take that first step, and that they have that guide and support all the way there. I also love the fact that you're talking about how, you know, trails are a way to really connect with, you know, everyone, and you know, your goal to really encourage more people of color to get out there and really enjoy the space that is theirs. One of our founding organizers for Rails to Trails, he often said that trails are like the main street of America. They connect people with their neighbors. You know, when you're always out there, you're saying hi, you're connecting with community leaders and businesses, and it's just a whole experience as well as nature. So thank you so much. Evan, I'm also going to ask you the same question, if I may. So how have you seen trails contribute to a community?
I think that's a fantastic question for you to answer, or for me to answer, for this panel here, seeing as the places where I've lived have been places with really notable contributions to trail building within their communities. Here in Washington, D.C., we have a true wealth of urban green space facilitated by these trails. All throughout the northwest quarter of D.C., as well as through Rock Creek Park. We have a network of trails that are both designed for recreation and for facilitating the business of the city. In fact, in a lot of ways, these are main arteries for the people who live in these neighborhoods to be able to get to work, to find dining options in their neighborhoods, to be able to reach their friends and family living in the area. And as a result, in the parts of DC that have a higher concentration of trail options, we see less traffic congestion on the roads and healthier populations. It's something that I think is really inspiring, and in fact can be used to get just about anywhere in our region. Some of these trails, they go all the way out to West Virginia, and it's truly an alternative transportation option, which I think is something that can't be overlooked enough. It's one of the most important elements of trails to me is being able to act as that Main Street of America, as you put it, to be able to give people that option to organically go about their day in a way that doesn't necessarily require private transportation. Something that allows folks to choose that healthier option that gets them out into the community. Oftentimes at earthday.org, we're talking about what can we do to help foster a happier, healthier, and wealthier future for communities everywhere. And I see trails as being a key asset to accomplishing all three of those things. When we talk about our theme for Earth Day 2023 of invest in our planet, we want to see investments in trails. We want to see investments in healthy communities. And when this is something that is considered by decision makers within the community, we see a return in prosperity for everybody. Stakeholders of all backgrounds have something to gain from participating in trail building, from using these community resources. It brings people together in a really dynamic way.
Thank you, Evan. I definitely want to hear more about the economic impact or the environmental impact of trails. I know you touched there a little bit about swapping trips and how that can be such a simple solve for people when there is access to trails. And you mentioned a lot of trails around this area, but also across the country there are trail networks that will connect a city to all of its neighborhoods, to connect counties together by trails, and also to connect states by trails, including the Great American Rail Trail that has one endpoint at the nation's capital, as well as all the way across the country to the Seattle Sound area. So you can go nearly coast to coast by one trail. And Ken, I wanted to ask the same question of you. So how have you seen trails contribute to a community?
Well, thanks. I certainly trails have made a personal difference in my life as well. I've enjoyed many different types of trails in my experience. In terms of work that we've supported from the CDC perspective in the field, there are many, many different places where trails have made difference to communities. I've seen that happen in places from Stockton, California, to Cleveland, Ohio, to Savannah, Georgia. In Savannah, for example, Active People, Healthy Savannah engaged everyone in the community to help plan for a 30-mile trail called Tied to Town. And because this work intentionally included the community in authentic ways, it created a common vision for a healthier and safer Savannah, and also ensured community-wide support for that trail. So that's just one example. There are many others that I've seen in my career at CDC and working in this area.
Thank you, Ken. I really appreciate that connection as well, that in order to get trails to communities that are disconnected from trails, it's important from the very start to engage communities and have them lead the process. And I love that example in Savannah, where that is where citizens are taking the initiative, and they are running and they are strategizing and creating a community that's built for them and by them. So thank you. So the third question, Evan, I wanted to return back to talking about the environment. So, trails that really are a space where many people are taking individual climate action, which you alluded to earlier. Whether that's getting more connected to public lands and waterways where they live, leading cleanup efforts, or swapping car trips with walks or bike rides, really to reduce congestion and emissions. So how does this individual climate action make a difference? And how can more people get involved?
I think that's a really interesting question, the way that you framed this, Heather, because From my perspective, while there are many individuals who are participating in trail culture and using these common resources, in a way, it's a collective action that we really see the impact forming from. When we see individuals choosing to use trails as a primary means of transportation rather than taking another car trip to get about their daily business, the more that these trails are used, the healthier the city becomes, both in terms of those individual health impacts from the people who are using these trails and moving their bodies along them, but also in terms of reducing emissions from the vehicles that aren't necessarily having to be used for these daily interactions. That means a reduction in carbon emissions. That means a reduction in smog emissions. That means that people can breathe easier with less congestion on the roads, less traffic incidents as a result of that congestion, and literally a healthier climate for people to interact in. And this is one of the key things that we're really trying to advocate for with our local elected leaders across the country this Earth Day. As I mentioned earlier, our theme for Earth Day 2023 is Invest in Our Planet, focusing on how stakeholders of all backgrounds can dedicate the time, resources, and effort to sustainable solutions that will put us on a happier, healthier, and wealthier path to the future. And with this in mind, local leaders can make an investment in trails to create those positive outcomes in the community. Positive outcomes that will lead to a more stable environment for people to not just survive in, but to thrive in. And as mentioned at the very beginning of this meeting, there are so many healthcare costs that are associated with inactivity, that are associated with the lack of trails, and that investing in our planet through implementing green spaces, especially those such as trails and greenways, that has that savings of over $20 billion, money that can be reinvested back into the community, into further climate and environmental action and further pathways towards prosperity. The more that we can invest early and often in our communities, the greater the rewards will be. And that's not to say that there are opportunities for individuals to make a difference here on the trails as well. I see the trails as being a really valuable asset to the environmental movement on that personal level as well. When you think about what it means to an individual's perspective by interacting with these trails. These trails are a key venue to inspire communities to value nature, to understand how they're connected to the world around them in a way that you might not necessarily get taking a car from your day-to-day business. And once you're exposed to the value that you're receiving from this, it's something that motivates people to get involved as a volunteer. And oftentimes these trails are a key venue for those volunteer opportunities. Every year on Earth Day, we see millions upon millions of people around the world getting involved in volunteer actions. And so often of the time, those events are planned and executed along a city's trails. And so it's a really great way to be able to give back to your community, take pride in it, and immediately start to see the benefits of your action. When you participate in a trail cleanup, that is one way in which you can demonstrate that your participation in the environmental movement mattered and made a real difference. And as you begin to see that there is more capacity for an individual to make a change through being active and vocal, that is what encourages people to take those high impact actions within the environmental movement, to then pick up the phone and call their mayor saying, we need more of these vital resources such as trails. We need to invest in sustainable transportation infrastructure. We need to invest in clean energy. We need to invest in our communities. And it's amazing to see that growth. My personal involvement in the environmental movement started by large on trails, participating in these volunteer activities. And I think that the more that people have access to these things, the more they'll be able to understand just how much of a difference each person can make when they dedicate just a little bit of their time to the environmental movement. Thanks, Heather.
Thank you, Evan. I really appreciate you taking us through the process of involvement, right? Sometimes when we hear about climate, initiatives, it can seem so big and we don't know where we can have that that intro and where we can offer support. So I appreciate you taking the time to spell out the two opportunities where we can all come together as a community, whether we are decision makers or members of the public who really care about our patch of the earth. So I love that, Trail Love started your involvement with earthdays.org. So appreciate that, but also appreciate the example of, being able to take part in a cleanup along a trail can be a wonderful initiative, not only just to connect with nature, get outside, smell that fresh air, but to really help in your community taking action for the climate. And Robin, I wanted to come to you as well and ask something similar. So how does individual climate action really make a difference, and how can more people get involved, whether that's in the group that you're overseeing or in Pittsburgh or wider?
For me, social media has been a great outlet, reaching a lot of people with just one click of a button. Recently, I went to one of the family-owned local bars. It's a great establishment, and I went there to promote getting outside and walking, being more physically active, perhaps not driving as much. And I've had some success. So, and actually the local trails here lead to parklets, local parks. And once you arrive there, lots of activities are going on in the local parks. So, and I've noticed, like, for instance, certain yoga classes that take place, people actually bike there with their yoga mats. There are yoga classes downtown Pittsburgh, where the Three Rivers Heritage Trail is, and people arrive there with their bicycles, with their yoga mats. So it definitely creates an opportunity not to drive as much and creates a better atmosphere for our health.
I really appreciate the example that's happening in Pittsburgh. And we know that it's also happening across the country, that when people are given the opportunity to walk or cycle for a short trip, whether that be 5 minutes away or 20 minutes away, they take the opportunity. And the more that you're out there on the trails and engaging with nature and seeing how important it is to your daily life, that is the inspiration and often the motivation that inspires further action, which is what Evan was talking about earlier. So thank you so much, Robin. And Ken, I also wanted to pose the same question to you, if I may. So how does individual climate action make a difference, and how can more people get involved?
Yeah, well, so I would say that the work that Active People supports to build support in communities for better places for people to be, like parks, trails, and greenways, also has climate co-benefits. So, for example, the trees that are along greenways can provide shade and reduce temperatures. And parks can also help manage storm runoff during heavy rains. And sometimes we actually see work that is intended to help with storm runoff actually also be used to support trail development, for example. So you can have, you can solve two problems with one investment.
Thank you. And Ken, I wanted to throw another question out at you, if I may. So we were talking about, earlier about two exciting ways that people can really engage in their communities and enjoy nature and trails, and that being Celebrate Trails Day and Earth Day that are happening on Saturday, April 22nd. So Ken, how do you plan to mark the moment on April 22nd, which is celebrating trails and investing in the planet?
Well, I'm really excited. I live in Atlanta, Georgia, but I will be returning to a place that's very special to my heart. I have a lot of roots there, and I will be participating in a Celebrate Trails event in Birmingham, Alabama. It's co-sponsored by a number of great organizations and will include a bike ride to celebrate the trail. I'm really looking forward to it. And one day we have a rail trail that goes halfway to Birmingham from Atlanta. And maybe one day we'll have a rail trail that goes all the way to Birmingham from Atlanta. But I also want to note that CDC will also be promoting Celebrate Trails Day on social media with our Active People Healthy Nation hashtag and our newsletter for Active People Healthy Nation, and through our Moving Matters campaign that you highlighted in your slide set. We will also encourage our many Active People Healthy Nation national partners to celebrate Trails Day by inviting people to enjoy a trail in their own community.
Thanks, Ken. I've heard so much about this Birmingham, Alabama event. I am so excited. I can't wait to see the photos. So if you're there, please, as you said you're going to, please send photos on social so we can celebrate you and everyone who is working to make this a great event. Evan, I wanted to pose the same question to you. So how are you planning to mark the moment on April 22nd?
Oh, there's no shortage of things that I'm planning to do on April 22nd. As the annual date for Earth Day, in some ways it's our Super Bowl. And we are just so ecstatic to be able to bring what is a year-long section of work to life for Earth Day 2023, and to help as many people worldwide be able to get out into nature and experience our planet as a whole. And one of the biggest ways that this happens, as I mentioned earlier, is on our trails. Every Earth Day, we direct our audience around the world to use our Earth Day map to find events that are happening within their communities. We have millions of folks finding thousands of events across the world to come to and participate, whether those be cleanups, tree plantings, advocacy events, and so much more. And included in that are just so many opportunities for people to get out and celebrate trails. In fact, we're going to be promoting all Celebrate Trails Days events, especially those coordinated by Rails to Trails Conservancy through this map, so that our audience can be sure to be connected to these high quality events that inspire them to not just make Earth Day a day, but a movement. It seems that our organizations are so well aligned when it comes to this idea that April 22nd, whether you're celebrating it under the name of Celebrate Trails Day or Earth Day or both, they're this moment for people to interact with nature in a meaningful way, to be able to get outside and experience something as a community that will inspire them to live a happier and healthier life. And we're just so happy to be able to support that movement worldwide and shine a spotlight on just how important it is for both individuals, leaders, and other decision makers alike to invest in our planet this April and beyond. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Evan. I really appreciate that framing of how Earth Day is a beautiful introduction. It's like an open door to being able to get outdoors and be of service on that day, but a moment to engage and connect throughout the year as well. Robin, I wanted to ask you the same question. So how are you planning to mark the moment on April 22nd?
For the second year, I am planning or have planned a bicycle festival. And we will have vendors, about 6 or 7 vendors that will take place and set up on the Eliza Furnace Trail or along the Gap Trail. And it's called the Color Park. And we're going to ride along the Gap Trail for about 15 miles. So we have lots of sponsors that are going to come out to represent their trails. The 9/11 Memorial Trail president will be there. And I like to think of it as a kickoff for the season. I also will be working in tandem with Friends of the Riverfront who maintains and owns part of the 33 miles of the Eliza Furnace Trail. And they are cleaning up, and they're going to also join us on the bike ride. So it's turned into a festival here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, that will be held along the trails.
Well, that kickoff festival sounds amazing, Robin. I know you're so lucky with the Gap Trail in your state. It's wonderful. So many people really enjoy that. So being able to create a moment for people to enjoy that experience, reconnect with family and friends, and enjoy the outdoors, that sounds wonderful.
Yeah, I was on the trail last summer and I met a fella who had flown in from San Francisco, California, to ride from Pittsburgh to Washington, D.C. So
I love
that
it.
was a
See,
trail moment for me.
that is a trail moment. Yeah, and some trail passion too.
Yeah.
So I had a question from our viewers, and Ken, this one's for you. You know, we were talking about earlier, you were sharing some examples of how people can really just do something simple to change their habit and to stay active. And so this question was asking, from a health standpoint, can you provide a measurable target for beginners? Is that walking 2 miles per week, maybe walking 5,000 steps a day, or biking 5 miles per week? What are some helpful examples?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, you know, when we answer this question, the answer is based on the physical activity guidelines for Americans. Second edition is the title of the scientific recommendation document. So I will say that, you know, in those guidelines, we recommend that people go from nothing to something. So, you know, going from being completely inactive to incorporating some activity in your day matters from a health perspective. You know, and it can be any amount of activity. Ultimately, you know, we'd like for people to aspire to 150 minutes of aerobic physical activity, and that means walking fast enough that you can talk but you can't sing. That's how kind of a common definition of what we mean by moderate aerobic physical activity. And so we hope that people can do that for 150 minutes a week. I could go into more detail about the science, but I won't here. I'm happy to follow up with more questions if you have them about sort of specific scientific thresholds where benefits accrue. I think that the only other thing I would want to add to that question is that I didn't mention in my remarks, but is important and is in the physical activity guidelines, is that we do also ask for Americans to do 2 sessions of 30 minutes a week of strength-based physical activity. And that doesn't mean going to the gym and lifting heavy weights. It means challenging major muscle groups in your body in a way that meets your needs in a safe fashion. And HHS, or Health and Human Services Secretary, has a website called Moving Matters that talks and provides details on how you might incorporate strengthening exercises into your day-to-day life.
Thanks, Ken. Can you repeat that website so people know where to go if they do want more examples of strength-based exercises? Yeah,
sorry, and to correct that for the record, it's called Move Your Way. Again, that's Move Your Way. If you Google Move Your Way and HHS, it'll come up, and I'll look it up real quickly and post it in the chat.
Thanks, Ken. Appreciate that. Yeah, I think that it's really encouraging that the CDC is giving a recommendation of just simply moving is beautiful. You know, it's such a welcoming and warm and inclusive way for people to move in whatever ways that inspire them. And instead of constantly figuring out, the goal is 150 minutes per week, of course, but anything is wonderful. So that's a beautiful, inclusive way to look at that. Thank you. Well, that is all the questions that we've had for this. Oh, there's a new chat. There's new questions, so bear with me. Let's see. All right, we have a question here. The question is, could you please talk about the cost of trail development and biggest challenges to overcome, being it financial, securing right-of-way, etc. Also, anything in any of the major the recent federal laws helping trail development? Yes. So I'm happy to take this one. Yes. So so regarding the cost of trail development. So trail development is, of course, a process that takes years, right? We say, it does take years because it takes years for design, inclusion of communities to engage, to feed back their thoughts and their expectations for the community that they want to have in the future. And so all of this conversation and creation and planning stages really does take time. About, sometimes it takes up to 10 years or more. Now, what we do know is that often the cost that it takes to develop trails is way far less than the actual economic benefits of trails. As you saw earlier in today's conversation, that trails all across the country have the potential to add to the nation's GDP, the nation's economy. And this is an annual estimate of over $130 billion annually. So that is way more than any trail network would cost to develop. And when you consider all the health and environmental impacts that it supports in communities by making more, when trails are connected to each other, it provides a network that weaves throughout communities and connects communities together to local destinations, popular watering holes, schools, jobs, and everything that allows people to, as Evan was saying earlier, be able to swap trips, because we do know that most of our trips are 5-minute walks or bikes or 20-minute walks and bikes trips. And we're often just jumping into the car instead of having the opportunity to make that shift there. So when you have trails that are in your backyard that you can access and safe walking, biking infrastructure, it allows you to make that a part of your exercise, a part of your routine, and a part of your day to connect with communities. So thank you so much for the questions. Really appreciate all of the insight here as well today. Thank you so much, Ken, for adding that fact sheet on economic development. We'll make sure that that's being sent out too. So if anyone hasn't gotten it, please do contact us at Rails to Trails Conservancy, and we'll make sure that is sent to you. Robin, Evan, Ken, I really appreciate your time, your insights, your expertise, your real life examples of how this is applied into your life and in your communities. And you have all shared how, trails and greenways and everything in between are really there supporting us and building happy and healthy people, communities, and the planet. So thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.